Although it has been occurring to women since the beginning of time, it was hardly ever discussed during the Tudor era. Menstruation is known by many names: the monthly curse, flowering, coming of age, a period, etc. But how did women in the Tudor era manage their cycles without the modern conveniences of sanitary napkins or, in some instances, painkillers? Stay watching to find out. Welcome to History Mysteries topic: Bizarre menstruation traditions in the Tudor era. A woman's menstruation was once thought to be God's retaliation for Eve, succumbing to temptation in the Garden of Eden. According to the Bible's Leviticus, a lady who is menstruating is impure and unclean. Because they had to endure the cramps and agony that God had given them, the church ruled that women were not permitted to use any type of painkiller while they were on their period. Women of the Tudor period did use a variety of herbs to relieve any pain they may have had related to menstruation despite this directive from the church. By word of mouth, these treatments were frequently disseminated. Additionally, the church commanded that women abstain from receiving Holy Communion while they were bleeding. There were also a lot of bizarre, absurd ideas about menstrual blood. Menstrual blood was thought by some of the time to be poisonous, hazardous, and capable of harming a man's penis. Some people also thought that if a woman had sex while she was menstruating, the infant would be born with red hair and possibly even be deformed. These beliefs were not universal at the time and did not always prevent individuals from engaging in sexual activity. Frequently, what took place in the household deviated from what the church prescribed. But what did individuals in the Tudor era know about menstruation? It was believed that a woman's ovaries and genitalia were erroneous representations of a man's sexual parts. The sexual organs of a lady were positioned internally inside the body. A woman required the dry, hot seed of a man to balance her because a man's internal body was thought to be dry and hot while a woman's was thought to be cold and wet. Given that the church forbade sex outside of marriage, this could only naturally come from her spouse. It was once thought that a woman's monthly hemorrhaging, also known as courses, was the womb purging itself of extra blood. In the absence of this, the woman's belly risked filling up with blood and possibly drowning her. Even though these concepts today may seem absurd, we must remember that hundreds of years of medical research and shifting perspectives on gender roles have educated us on all matters relating to the female body. Women were viewed as inferior to males and flawed reflections of them during the Tudor era. Many young women at the time believed that the start of menstruation marked the transition of a young girl from being a kid to becoming a woman. It's interesting to note that the typical onset of menstruation corresponded with the legal consent age at the time, which was between 12 and 14 years old. There were several remedies used to help a woman's period come on because it was thought that women who did not have regular periods or did not have a period at all were too much like males. These included taking hot baths, putting plants in the vagina, or drinking herbs like rue, which was thought to start a woman's monthly period. It was thought that Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife, had irregular periods because of her extreme fasting and devotion to her religion, which had an impact on her monthly cycles. How women managed their monthly periods back then without tampons or sanitary pads is a perennial mystery. Rags were used as cleaning items most frequently. These were pieces of fabric that were bundled and positioned against the vagina between the thighs. Naturally, these would absorb the blood and ideally prevent any unforeseen discoloration. Another method involved using cotton or wool rags in place of fabric ones. These rags may have needed to be washed and reused depending on a person's position and access to materials. Although it has been proposed that women of the era wore some sort of girdle or rough underwear, there is sadly little evidence to support how these rags or pieces of wool were held in position. Another point that needs to be made is that having children was one of a woman's main roles at the time. The frequency of a woman's periods would have decreased if she was routinely pregnant. The father of Anne Boleyn, Thomas Boleyn, stated, "When I married, I had only 50 pounds a year to survive on for me and my wife, as long as my father lived, and yet she brought me a child every year." Elizabeth Boleyn would have had few courses each year because she was expectant for 9 months out of every year. Menstruation was a daily and very prevalent occurrence during the Tudor era, despite the fact that it was a taboo subject. Because all females at the time anticipated getting their period, it was thought that when they did, they had reached puberty and were ready to become pregnant. The continuation of a family line depended on a woman's ability to conceive, so even though it was rarely discussed and considered taboo, it was important for signaling fertility. Remember to like and subscribe to this channel, hit the bell button for easy notifications.